Okay, we will get this started. Kia ora everyone, I am Elizabeth Pretty, and on behalf of the New Zealand Association of Resource Management, thank you for registering for the webinar on the TreeFarmer Decision Support Tool. For those of you who are not familiar with NZARM, it is an association for professionals involved in the natural resource management space, particularly across land and water. NZARM webinars are produced under the NZARM Capability Building Project, a 3-year program where NZARM has partnered with the Ministry for the Environment and regional councils to support the upskilling of individuals across the sector. We're lucky enough to have Graham West, a forestry consultant with over 48 years research experience, including topics such as forest management, economics, wood supply chains, and computer modelling with us today. Before I hand over, if you have any questions, could you please put them in the Q&A function at the top of your screens, and we will answer these towards the end. Thank you, and now I'll hand over to you, Graham.
Okay, thank you, Eliza. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, so I've been asked to describe to you and demonstrate a tool that's used and developed through farm forestry and the forestry levy that collects funds from all forest growers. And my role in it has really been the project manager and designer of the tool. And so what I thought would be to start with some slides, and I'll just run through a little bit of PowerPoint if I can. Is that on the screen now, Eliza?
Yep, that's all good.
Okay, so what I want to explain is, why have we built this tool? What does it do for you? And I guess how it might fit into your role. So TreeFarmer is, as it applies, is all about trees and trees on farms, basically, typically what you see on the screen at the moment there, which is a woodlot. And this is in Hawke's Bay, just out of Taradale, for example. But this is the typical thing that it's about. So where did it start? About 6 years ago, or thereabouts. Let me get it to change. We began to address an issue that was coming up, which was that forestry was becoming a little political, I guess, and what we were hearing was, particularly from some farmers, was that there was no money in growing pine trees, basically, and that people had had a bad experience with trees, and they talked about all the problems. So we decided to collect some data and to understand what was really the case. And so we surveyed the farm forestry membership and got back 215 returns, as you can see on this graph, that show the net returns or profit from a woodlot for a range of regions in New Zealand and for a range of woodlot sizes. And what's perhaps surprising is the huge variation in returns for forestry on farms. And this doesn't change with woodlot size very much. Small woodlots can be quite profitable, as you can see up here, and some can be earning very little. And it didn't matter whether you're in Marlborough, Nelson, or Hawke's Bay. On average, the return was $30,000 per hectare. So this is net return profit to you in your hand, and clearly showed that yes, there were people making a lot of money out of forestry on farms, and there were also people who weren't making very much at all, which is the bottom data along the bottom here. This is written up in a report that's sitting in the tree grower it's put out by Farm Forestry, so you can read in greater detail. But what it raises is, why are there some people making a lot of money and some people making very little money out of forestry? What's going on? And so Investigating the data, this is the cost of getting the wood to market. So management, harvesting, transport, not roading. And what that showed is that there was also a large variation in costs to achieve that. Again, not changing with woodlot size very much. Average costs were about $65 a tonne there. So if we look further, and one thing we found that was highly correlated was the amount of volume that was harvested. And generally, if you harvest trees later or on better sites or have higher stockings and get higher volumes, you will make more money out of it, basically. And that's not unusual. Average volumes were 560 tonnes per hectare. This is the merchantable volume. And you can see a general trend of harvest volume increasing with net returns, which is useful. Looking at it further, this is a selection of 62 examples there ranked by high to low. And so the purple of the bar shows the net return or profit that they're receiving. And these guys are making a lot of money, and down the far end, they're making very little. But what's interesting is the red bars, which is the harvesting costs, and that's quite variable, but it's also quite significant in there in terms of the overall. Log cartage is important and can be significant, as you can see on some sites, and roading is not complete, but roading wasn't a huge cost for most of these returns. What was interesting is only 43% of the revenue gained by harvesting the trees went back to the grower. And so what is going on there is, I guess, what we wanted to investigate. And one of the major realizations was that if you look for the drivers of timber profit in particular, across a landscape like this, and this is typical, you've got a tar seal road in the bottom corner here, so this is public road, farm track, different range of terrains, that if you put a woodlot in the flat and easy accessible country in the front versus a woodlot that was on a steeper slope in the middle of the farm versus a woodlot that was sitting in the back of the farm on steep country. As you'd expect, there is huge differences in costs associated with those woodlots. And what you can see in this example here, this is actually the hill country around Lake Rotorua, is that typically we have got trees planted in this steep incised country up in the hills, and generally they don't make very much money from it because of the high costs associated with it. So what does this tell us? Basically that the slope, the slope of the land, which affects the access roads, the harvesting costs, there's obviously effects on erosion and productivity. The distance to the public road, so if you have to cart from the back here to the front to get a truck there, you have to put on a road that'll carry a truck, and it has to be a slope that's not over 7 degrees, otherwise the truck can't safely drive on it. And the third part is the distance to market. So how far does that truck have to travel before it unloads? And of course, if it's in the back of the Tamaranui, for example, it's got a long way to go before it gets to market compared to, say, the coast hill country of Bay of Plenty. So what does that sum up to? And I think there's 3 lessons that we learned. And the first one is that location is one of the major drivers for net profit in timber. And the second one is that location is important. And this is obviously different locations. There's the location within the farm, there's the location in terms of the region, and there's the location in terms of access to market. And so it's 3 simple rules. It's a bit like real estate, is that if you know those rules that you need to watch out for, slope, distance to public road, and distance to market, those 3 things affect timber profit a great deal. And so what that was telling us was that why have half of those returns planted trees on sites that don't make profit? And it's partly because they didn't know the consequences of it. And that's why we built TreeFarmer, really, was to allow them to evaluate what you can see on the screen, understand the issues that they need to address, and perhaps do analysis on different parts of the farm to get a better result. To do that, we built TreeFarmer, basically, and TreeFarmer's been built over the last 3 or 4 years, as I say, supported by Farm Forestry, funded by the levy, and it gives you this front screen is the first screen and tells you a little bit about it there. And that I'll go into that in a little more detail. I'll just flick through a few more slides and then we'll have a live demonstration. So the key to TreeFarmer is that it actually accesses information over the web in real time. So it uses what's called web services, which is only a recent innovation that's allowed to happen inside of the IT world. So in effect, what it's doing, for example, is it is going to the LINS database to get property titles, aerial imagery, and infrastructure. And it's doing that while you're actually accessing it. It doesn't store it. It just gets the latest version from LINS. It could go to other land descriptors or other report maps. Aerial imagery is classic. Productivity of species has been created by Scion, and it accesses a series of maps, which I'll show you there, which underpin it. And it could access regional council information if they made it available as a web service. And I think this is really the future and the key in terms of allowing landowners to make decisions in their own home with their own computer is really having a freely available all this information through a system like TreeFarmer that's really just an integrator. So I say again, it's going to, when I started up, it's going to access this information live, and as it's changed by these organizations, it picks up the latest version. That's the key to it. Two is that the spatial representation that you can now get with freeware has gone a quantum step in terms of flexibility. And so this doesn't run on ArcGIS or some expensive license system. It runs on freeware that really costs me nothing to access. And that makes the whole thing a lot cheaper. And also it's open source, so it gets updated as it goes. The other aspect is that it can deliver research results. So this is an example of tree data that's been collected through Scion, who, people will measure trees, it goes into a database. Scientists convert it to a growth model or a yield projection model and a productivity surface that's put into a calculator, and often that's the end of it. What we've found is that farm foresters don't know how to use calculators and don't really feel capable of doing it. So we need to take this next step, which is really making it being transferred into something that works spatially for them. So it works on a polygon, a paddock, or a stand, and it's able to access a estimate of tree wood volume, let's like, by site, regime, and age. It's also then generating things like wood yield and carbon, and it's also now creating log grades, which can be converted, into revenues. The other part of it is that these layers now come through a website called Coordinates that you're probably familiar with. So again, when Scion creates, or whatever research organization creates a layer, it's available almost immediately to the system through a third-party provider, basically. Otherwise, you have to go to the CRI cap in hand, go through their legal system and try and access their data, etc. I'm sure some of you have done that, and it takes a lot of time. We've now got a streamlined system, I guess, of delivering research results through to the end user, who who's paying for the research in the first place. Some idea of the output is a productivity layer like this. So this is the coastal, Bay of Plenty, and radiata pine, and it's volume production in terms of a index called the 300 index, and it's at the 100 meter pixel level. So quite detailed information, and by the color scheme you can see for the legend here, the red stuff is where radiata grows best, and the blue is where it grows the worst. And I've converted it into kilograms of dry matter for a comparison with pastoral productivity. And you can see there that radiata is growing best on this high quality flat sites on the coast. But of course, so is dairy and so is horticulture. So it's not planted on those sites at all. It's planted on this hill country that's in the brown, so where it can compete with sheep and beef by and large on, say, Class 6 land. And this is where a lot of the forest expansion has occurred in the Bay of Plenty. It's along these coastal hills here, right through to Rotorua. And you can see that, by clicking on that, you can see what the productivity of this species and 5 others would be on your particular farm. So I'm going to very briefly just run through an example and then see it live. But how it works is basically you enter the address wherever you're going to, or if you know where it is, you can find it. But basically, TreeFarmer serves up an aerial image with an overlay of a cadastral map and gives you the boundaries of the farm. Most people know where their farms are and where the boundaries are, but this lays it out for you. And on it, I've digitized in 5 woodlots. And basically, this is hill country over by Wairoa, for example. And I've said, okay, imagine if I wanted to plant a woodlot here, a woodlot there, etc. And I can put them anywhere I like because it's just a piece of paper that we're drawing on, in effect. And over here on the right, it allows you to work out the cost of establishment. So you put in the ground cover. And here is a range of species that you can click on and select and plant those theoretical woodlots. Decide whether you're going to prune or thin, which is here, and what age you're going to cut it down, basically. So in this example, we're testing radiata, poplar, redwood, Cupressus lusitanica, and native plantations. So note, these are plantations, not regeneration, that we're going to show here. And if we look at the results, which is what it has been built to do, it comes through and calculates the area, the slope, the establishment costs per hectare for each species in this column, what pruning, tending regime, and what those costs are going to be, and what is the all operational costs for those 25.92 hectares, basically. So this is what it's indicating a farmer will have to invest to get 26 hectares of radiata pine on that site, fully tended. Here's the volume it estimates it will produce at the rotation age, the carbon stock that's available at age 50 if it was permanent, or the carbon stock that's available if it was averaging. And so you can convert that into dollars if you want to with a carbon price there. So very quickly you can see the things that they want to know, which is, how does radiata compare with redwood? How does that compare with native, etc.? What are my options? And of course, if you don't like those, you can go back and select others or move the woodlot to another position, because this is somewhat driven by the location and the expected ground cover that's going to be there. Then I've taken one of the woodlots and looked at simulating the harvesting, because the very next thing you really should do is understand the harvesting and marketing costs of that woodlot. And we can do that. So this case here, we've digitized in a road and the red colouring is given in this key here. So this is telling you how much slope is on that road, and a lot of it is very steep, which means I should change it. And these yellow dots are where skid sites would be. So this is to put a truck across this country to pick up logs and cart them out. I've obviously drawn the road in a loop, which is quite common. And if you don't know where to draw the roads, and the general principle is that these roads are generally put along ridge lines. They're not in gullies, they're not in swamps, obviously, for obvious reasons. They try to minimize slope, and they generally keep to ridges and keep the road, I guess, free of erosion and bogging through winter. That allows me then to simulate what would be the harvesting costs associated with it. And here's a little table I'm not going to go through in great detail that gives you the access road costs, transport costs. It's carting the wood to Napier Port, which is 72 kilometres away. It's easy for it to work it out there. It's going to also the mill at Whirinaki at 55 kilometres. Calculates costs for skids, tells you maybe about the area of drawn. But this is really the thing that's of interest. So here is your harvesting, access, transport, skids, road costs, etc. And if this number is too high, then you shouldn't plant the paddock, basically, because you won't make any money. So this is teaching farmers what are all the issues at harvesting time, what should they be thinking about, because most of them only ever harvest a woodlot once in their lives, and it's a learning experience and sometimes goes very bad. But generally you can work out quickly, which is on the next table, what is the net return for each one of these species. So again, a lot of information, but what it's telling me is that in this site, radiata would make about 21,000 net, which is not great, but it's not too bad. And on average, that would return the farmer $850 per hectare without discounting. So this is just that number divided by the years it's taken to grow it. And simply, it's saying poplar species would not make money, I'd probably lose it, but it's probably there for erosion purposes. Redwoods would probably make a lot, and the numbers coming out of redwood modelling is really high at the moment. And for Lusitanica, it could be very good, but generally it's showing that this is a harvest age of 43, that you would have to wait a lot longer. So a lot of information, but this is what it's about. Is so you look at that, you perhaps don't like what you've got there, and you go back and change it, and it's at no expense. So what I'll do now is just switch to TreeFarmer. What's the time? Okay. So is the TreeFarmer interface on the screen there, Eliza?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So when you click on the URL, which I'll show you in a minute, this is the interface that pops up. Basically, you click continue, and you get a map of New Zealand, which you can zoom in and out of and do the usual mapping things, which is going to require my glasses. And over on the left-hand side here, we've got a range of layers that show, and so we'll zoom in and perhaps look at productivity layers. And so you perhaps can't see that clearly, but these are different species. So if we click on radiata pine, for example, it's going to fill it out. You can zoom out, and it's giving me expected growth rates for radiata pine for that site, which is pretty uniform. Just switch over here. Or if we want to, we can look at redwoods, which are obviously different. And so these hot colours are where redwoods grow well, and the cool colours are where redwoods won't grow well. And some places redwoods won't grow very well at all. We can look at, for example, cypress, which is yet another layer. And you can see some similarities, but generally each species has been derived using the site variables, the climate, rainfall, soils, etc., and they're slightly different. We close that up. The other things we can look at are things like wind risk and fire risk. Won't go into those. Infrastructure, we can look at things like power lines. So power lines are pretty important when it comes to trees because of the obvious that you can't plant trees within the length of the tree. You can't plant them closer to wires than the length of the tree if it's falling. And there are power lines. These are the major power lines systems here, and it's not going to let me do it. But as I zoom in, some of these things become active and some don't. But there is two databases of power lines, and the local ones are more finicky. Here they are here. And so these are the ones along the road. So particularly, here they are here. Particularly, you need to watch with power lines when trees get big, but particularly when you start harvesting, so that if you've got machinery that's operating around power lines that run along roads, it's very, very dangerous. So you need to keep that in mind. It also tells us where there are metal. So we've got rock pits, shingle pits, and things like that. I don't know if I've picked one that's saying shingle is along the river. The point about this is that when you start to harvesting and building roads, you often need a lot of metal to do that. And what I've found is that there are metal pits all over New Zealand that have been on the starter base. I can't find one at the moment, but anyway, we'll allow you to find them. In terms of environment, we've got things like waterways, which is what you'd expect. So it shows, obviously, if you've got major concerns around riparian setbacks and things like that, you need to build them into your planning. And the other thing that we've got is the slope layer. So the red is the steep country, as you'd imagine, and this is quite useful for harvesting because obviously you've got to keep your roads off the steep slopes, and it also allows you to think about which parts of the farm could be eroding, and it's affected by slope layer or the erosion layer, which is this is the NES BF erosion layer, which might take a while to load. It comes slowly. Oh no, here it is. So what that tells me is that all that's red zone around those waterways there. I think most of you know what red zone means, basically, but it generally means avoid it because you're going to have to get consents, basically, to do any harvesting there. There's a series of maps that you can look at underneath there. So quite a lot of information that allows you to look at it. You can go full screen, and then you've basically got a thing a bit like Google Maps, which allows you to wander around and look at properties or any issue that you've got there. What I'll briefly show you is that once you set up a farm, it's stored as a project. So what I'll do is just load an existing project, which is a file sitting on my computer, basically, and we'll do planting, for example, and say open it. So it zooms to the project that I've set up, which is what I was showing in those slides, and here's one woodlot, for example. I can now, if I want to add more woodlots or take that one away or whatever I want to do, and this is already set up for some of the assumptions that I've made before. We have a wind risk model in there in terms of the risk of wind throw particularly from storms, and it then calculates the summary that I showed you before, which will take a few seconds, I hope, depending on your internet speed, and it'll give you a report. Maybe I'll stop it. It's I'm out in the country on farm side, and my here it is. So here's the report coming through, and it's immediately given to you in the right side of the screen. So generally we're just trying to make it simple, and so there's only one screen you deal with the whole time there, and we can now print those results, save those results, or usual things, make it a PDF, all those sorts of things as you'd expect there. Or if I make changes to the project, I can save it and the like. If I want to look at the harvesting, I've got a separate project that I've set up around that, and here's the harvesting, which sits under this tab here, basically, which tells me what I've done. I've used this file here to set up the volumes. I'll click on that very briefly. So in this setup, you can select the species, the tending regime that's been through the age, you're going to cut it down, the conversion factor. This gives the log grades percentages, and you put in a price beside that, and you can do that for all the species or none of the species, depending on what you want to do there. Say OK, and then run the analysis. You can then go back and change the log prices or any other assumptions and run it again. And it quite quickly allows you to do option analysis on a stand that hasn't even been harvested, they haven't even been planted yet there. So some input around the woodlot, around its age, the percentage of harvest that will be completed in summer. So it gives it a adjustment for summer harvesting, percentage that'll be exported, and is there a source of suitable road metal, as I talked about there, that can be put in place there. So that's cool. In terms of other things, we have here is a user manual that allows you to read and fill in things that have seek questions. We have a tutorial. These are basically a little webinar, and we have a list of helpful checks, so which we think is quite important. So there are 2 pages of things like, are you aware of your health and safety responsibilities as a person conducting business or undertaking, and can you find them? And it gives you a little link. But this is the learning part of it, is that there is quite a lot to planting and harvesting a forest in terms of regulation and issues about responsibilities, including, things like, do you know a reputable service provider for the above options? And they can look up things like that in the Farm Forestry website. So 22 helpful hints there that you can print out or check off. There's a species selection tool which allows you to go to the Farm Forestry website to do that. This is just leads to the Farm Forestry. And under here, we have a set of release notes that basically tell you what's put into each version of the model. Okay, so just like to go back now to the PowerPoint. So am I back there, Eliza?
Yeah, you're back now.
Okay, so I just wanted to sort of sum up, and then we have some Q&A basically. So, this is a typical scene, I think, in that this is Lake Rotorua Basin. A small woodlot being harvested here, not far from the road. So here's the tar seal road that curves around here. It's been picked up. It's been harvested, exported probably to Mount Maunganui, and quite safely done. No erosion, and very typical of good practice. A lot of machinery now are involved and very little manual felling and those sorts of things. But my suggestion around that complex array of things that I've just suggested to you is that if you join the Farm Forestry Association, you get access to field days and people who have been through all of that. And a lot of people have learnt the lessons and give you good advice on where to plant, what species to plant, how to manage harvesting, what to deal with in terms of regional council consents, etc. Or use a consultant, because often harvesting can involve millions of dollars basically, and a consultant generally will save you a lot of money. They know how to trim costs, or to look at your proposals that you've received and judge whether they are basically going to be the best you can get, or whether you should be perhaps pushing back on the costs. My experience is generally there is room to move on the costs that are quoted for harvest management there. And get 3 quotes at least for the harvest management and marketing there. Never accept the contractor who worked on your neighbour's property and sounds pretty good, because often a little bit of competitive pressure makes a big difference to the outcome. Get the roads and skids ready early, because they take a while to settle in, and when prices lift, everybody wants the contractor and everybody wants to get going. And if you're ready, you're more than likely going to get a quick start, because contractors like jobs that are set up and easy and ready to go. And allow funds at the end of that for the site prep and replant, because often there is a requirement to replant those sites. And that's going to cost you in the region, as I showed, of about $2,500 to $3,000 per hectare. And lastly, manage your tax liability, because that's a big issue, as I've found with my own forestry, is that having an accountant who really understands how to minimise your tax liability makes a huge difference, because otherwise you will pay a huge whack of tax when you start harvesting forestry, because it's quite difficult to avoid. So briefly, best practice on farm is, the key is, how do you integrate the trees into the farming operation? What this is showing is perhaps obvious, is that you're going to take out the steeper country that grows less grass and is possibly going to dry out in summer, all those sorts of things. So this is what's happened here. Excuse me. And so obviously you're planting the marginal areas of the farm. So this is the issue that people haven't quite figured out, is that we don't need to do whole farm conversions. We really should be doing, the farm forestry model, which allows you to plant the areas that are not making enough profit, or you're not going to miss very much if you take them out in it. Plant a reliable species, because there's a lot of talk about some flash, whatever, eucalypt or something or other that may sound good. And unless you know quite a lot about it, it's perhaps easier to plant something that grows everywhere. The reason being that most species are site specific. That is, they may not like frost, they may not like wind, they may not like dryness. All those sorts of things come into play. Radiata grows like a weed in most sites, as you would know. How to deal with radiata is to plant trees without straight lines, plant them across the contour, and plant amenity trees in front of them or adjacent to them, so that you get nice vistas like this, basically. So this is a a very happy client that we had who basically started off by saying, we want to plant trees and we don't want any straight lines, right? So we said, right, well, if you want to alter the fences, that's fine, but we can plant them any configuration you like. And so these trees are all got little curves and hollows and things in it. Plant the best of genetics because there's a 60-year tree breeding program. There's a big difference between poor and good genetics, and like everything, it will make you more money, basically. I suggest you prune and thin. There are people who aren't keen on that, but in the long term, you are probably going to be a price taker. You're probably going to forget the cost you've invested 25 years before, and you will make more money out of prune logs than unpruned logs, but generally. No straight lines, as I suggest, are there, and that's easily achieved if you've got this sort of arrangement there. And amenity species on the boundary. So to summarize, location and best practice drives profitability in timber forestry. Those are the two simple rules that are encapsulated in, I guess, what we've learned over the last 60 years of farm forestry. TreeFarmer provides these things, I think, on top of that. That is, you learn from it by using it. What are the issues? What decisions do you need to make? How can I avoid costs? All those sorts of things. It provides a planning tool, which is obviously spatial, and it's on your farm with your fence lines, etc., to deal with. Allows you to test options at no cost because you're wise to check out a lot of alternatives before you invest, and it's delivering you research results, straight to your PC. Basically, you don't know it, but it's connected up into Scion, and we're getting the research results through time. So here's the URL, which is pretty obvious, and you can Google it and find it pretty quickly there. So thank you, and any questions, please?
Awesome. Thanks, Graham. We have a couple of questions that have come through. So the first one we've got from Sammy Fox. She says, great presentation. Regarding the log price preset value, is this updated on the last 12 months of log price data?
No, it's an input that you make. So you have to find the the defaults that are sitting in there are the best as of about 3 or 4 months ago. So there are defaults sitting in there. But you're wise to look at the data that's available either on Olson's website or on AgriHQ, because what you should be using is the long-term average of, say, the last 5 years or something like that as a guide. Don't use today's prices because they won't apply for in 25 years time, basically. So there are some defaults, but they also really encourages you to put your own numbers in there.
Awesome. Another one here just around the data security. Are there any measures in place to protect any information that the user may put in?
The information that you're putting in is stored on your machine as a local file. It's what's called a JSON file. It's a format, but don't worry about it. It's so the short answer is it's private to you. No one else will see the projects that you are running on TreeFarmer, basically, because there's no centralized database of usage or who's using it or any of that sort of thing, if that makes sense. There's no login, there's no password. We're trying to avoid all that, basically, so that it's been structured carefully so that it is run in your browser. It's not an application that's stored on your machine, it's run in your browser, but it stores the files that it's recording on your machine in a folder that you choose. Yeah.
Cool, thank you, Graham. One here from Mel. She's mentioned, did she say all the native trees that are lumped together? Wouldn't there be huge variability between species and site?
Yep. No, you're right. So what I've used is really the outcomes on the Tāne Tree Trust website. So they've got yield estimates and growth models and costs there. So those yields, as I say, are for planted stands, and for that I've chosen just a mixture of the five tall trees. Basically, I can't remember what they are, but they're probably Totara, Remu, Matai, Kahikatea, maybe one other. So it is a mixture. But you're right. If you planted all Totara, for example, then you would probably get a different result, and you'd have to go to Tāne Tree Trust's website to use their model to get that yield out of it, basically.
What else? Are all the resources that you've just mentioned, Graham, are they included somewhere within the tool? Is there a nice list somewhere, or are they just off the top of your head?
The resources, sorry, say that again.
So in terms of, like you just mentioned, Tane's Tree Trust, in terms of these, yeah.
There are some links to some useful websites, but I don't think we've got the Tāne Tree Trust one in there. So what I've done in the manual is given some description of the basis of the data that's sitting in there. So how did we derive the yield tables and those sorts of things is what's in there. But I mean, other than that, just give me a phone call. I can answer it. We also have a user group that meets about every quarter, which gives me feedback on questions like that. You know, can we add this or can we change that sort of thing?
Cool. So are there any current limitations to the tool or any updates that are planned?
It's going to have more productivity layers. So because it's funded and backed by the levy and farm forestry, provided we get more money out of the levy next year, it's always an issue, then we would, there's an ongoing program of improvement. So, and what I rely on is a user group to say to me, we think these are the priority things. I put in an application for funding, and for the last 4 years, we have got funding pretty easily from the levy to do that. But what we've got coming, because I know they're almost complete from Scion, are 5 eucalypt productivity models, basically. So we will see the productivity map for Eucalyptus regnans, fastigata, nitens, forgotten the other one, probably Saligna and one other, for example. And, you know, the guy will tell me when he's made it, he'll put it into coordinates, I'll get the software guys to load it, and you'll see it. Basically, it'll be in that sequence, yeah.
Cool. We've got a question here from Simon Stokes. He would like to know, would you need to be a registered forestry advisor to use it with a client, or is it more in an advisory evaluating context to support farm plan development?
Simon Stokes would know the answer to that. But anyway, no, well, there's no registration with MPI around forestry advice anymore. That's being canned. It's really an educational tool, I think, is a better way of viewing it, and people learn from it. You know, what I think NZARM people can do is sit with a farmer, have tree farmer working on their laptop, and they can talk about options and test things and maybe go away. You can also share the project file, so you can create a project, email it to the farmer, and the farmer can load it into his farmer and see it, sort of thing. So it's very transferable. But Yeah, the original idea was where I started was how did some people growing forestry make such mistakes that they never made any money out of the tree crop, basically? How do we avoid that? And that's uh, an advisory role or education, because I'm sure you've run into it, but you sit down with a farmer and start talking about harvesting, and well, they don't know where to start, and they don't know how to deal with basically a business practice that they've never had to deal with in their career, basically.
Cool. Thank you, Graham. I think that's just about all the questions we have today, unless anyone else has any more. But this webinar has been recording and will be available shortly on the NZARM website. But thank you again for all registering and attending, and thanks, Graham, for presenting today.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. Yeah, no trouble. Make contact if you have any questions. Yeah.
Right,
Thanks,
we'll put
Simon.
Graham's contact details on the website and an email out as well. Great.
Okay. And
Have a good
Simon
rest of your
okay.
day. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Liza. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.